No bitch, no bitch, all she do is no shit. No bitch, no bitch, no bitch, all she do is no shit. Call this shit go to the beat that you probably ever saw. Okay, I hope that you guys can see me and you guys can hear me okay. I am having a little bit of internet issues, so hopefully that won't impact us too much. If it becomes distracting, you guys know the drill by now. If you've attended one of these or you've been to one of these talks with me, just put some comments in the comment section and I'll try to address it as best as I can. Hi, it feels like it's been forever, right? I'm Hunsi Soleil. So if this is your first time meeting me, hi, I'm one of the priestesses over at the Voodoo Institute. I am here for another installment of my Charm School series. So for those of you who may be wondering why we're doing Charm School here, and if you know me personally, you may be thinking, for real, why you are doing a Charm School series? I want to talk a little bit about why and why I think that this is important. If you know me personally, you know I'm not really a politics of respectability kind of person. And so I think that these conversations are important, not so much for respectability politics, for appeasing whiteness. It's not about any of that shit. And I don't do that. So hopefully no one ever walks away from these conversations thinking that's why I started this series. I started this series because in my time as a priestess and in the time that I've started taking clients, I've seen certain things, certain problems that people create for themselves. And if we could understand the behavioral patterns that kind of get us into these situations, then we can just use our magic for elevation and uplift. I'm somebody who is interested in learning high magic and continuing to use my efforts towards high magic, right? You have to do a lot less of this low vibrational hexing and all this other shit when you just know how to show up in the world in a way that gets you the results that you want. So that's kind of the thought process behind me creating this Charm School series. It's just to have conversations about, okay, well, what are the ways that our behavior can protect us spiritually? That's simple. That needs to be the tagline. That's the elevator pitch right there. So that's why I started this series. I've been having fun with it so far. I hope that you guys have fun with it. I try not to offend people, but I also am, I serve certain gods and I owe things to my ancestors, and the truth is one of those things. So if I say something and you're offended, I hope that you can use that as an opportunity to learn and sharpen yourself rather than, because I don't fucking care. I mean, I respect y'all, but I don't really care like that. So hopefully this conversation won't be too offensive to anyone. If you see yourself reflected in it, please use that as learning experience. If you see people that you know reflected in it, also use that for learning experience. That's what this is all about at the end of the day. Hi, Sassy. Thank you for joining. Hi, Maze Guido. Thank you for joining as well. Hello, Elisa. As people roll in, don't hesitate to drop some scale emojis. It gives me power. It lets me know that you guys are with me. It lets me know that you guys are on the same page as I am, which is helpful. This also, I do have notes. You guys know that I'm a big person on my notes. They're a little out of order, so just bear with me. I'm gonna try to put this together in a way that's cogent for us as much as possible. How many of y'all have ever heard of the phrase loose lips sink ships? I used to hear it so much growing up. I used to hear it all the time. I thought it was some weird ass just country saying that people were throwing around. I didn't give it a whole lot of weight. But the older I get, the more I understand that phrase. Loose lips do sink ships. We destroy opportunities by talking too much. We destroy relationships by talking too much. We destroy career connections and opportunities by not knowing when it's okay and when it's appropriate to speak and say certain things, and when it's best to, exercise some discernment and fucking be quiet and listen, right? So that phrase, Loose lips sink ships is very important. And I think it's going to anchor a lot of what we end up talking about tonight. So what is talking? What is compulsive talking? It is exactly what it sounds like. It is talking without any thought, talking nonstop, not giving any thought to the words that are coming out of your mouth before you say them, being uncomfortable with silence and feeling a need to fill up space, even if you're not contributing to the space in any kind of way. Oh God, this internet connection is upsetting me. I already see the lag. I'm going to continue. But yeah, that's basically over talking. For some people, a very small population of people, it can be related to some sort of mental health condition or exacerbation, right? So sometimes we overtalk due to anxiety. Sometimes if we find ourselves in our valleys or in a depressive state, and I'll talk about that a little later, we can overtalk because we're longing for connection, right? So definitely make sure that you are in contact with a mental health professional or a life coach, somebody who can give you that support so that if this is something that is compulsory and chronic, you have somebody to talk to you about it. But honestly, most of us overtalk just because of bad social behavior. I don't know any other way to say it. I think, especially because we live in this internet era, we are used to one-sided communication. We're used to getting off a feeling and walking away, punching and walking away, as I like to call it. I've actually fallen out with 2 people this year about that shit. You don't hop in my comments, you don't hop in my DMs and say something weird to me and then run off and then act like I'm a crazy person when I remember that shit, right? But it is something that people do. We're used to really one-sided conversation. So we've picked up a lot of bad communication practices from our internet behaviors, and we've now incorporated that shit into life. So what does that look like for a lot of us? What does that look like? Being uncomfortable with silence, right? We hate a blank screen. It means that we don't really know how to pick up on social cues anymore. So rather than being engaged in conversation that is thoughtful, in which you are actually listening to understand the person that you're talking to, we do a lot of listening to wait for the other person to shut up so that we can then interject and make the subject about us, right? So again, that's bad behavior. That's not healthy communication. There's no way to have connection if that's how you're showing up in your communications, right? So again, when we find ourselves over talking, the main thing we want to do is pause and ask ourselves why it's happening. Now, there are a few different reasons why we overtalked. I mentioned earlier, sometimes if we're dealing with anxiety, if we're dealing with some sort of longing, that can put us in a position where we're over talking because we're seeking connection. But the reality is that it doesn't give us connection. It actually repels people. It has the opposite impact, and I'll talk about that in a second. But sometimes over talking has the impact of we over talk because we have unmet needs. There's no other way around it. I'm going to go through 5 examples of over talking and or situations that cause us to overtalk and what we need to be mindful of in those situations so that we can watch ourselves. But at its core, a lot of times when we overtalk, when we overshare, when we get around strangers and tell them about our personal business, when we confuse social groups and assume that it's okay to have intimate conversations like at work per se, we do that because we have some unmet social need that needs to be acknowledged. And it's important to get to the root of that, deal with that social need so that we don't constantly put ourselves in the fire by over talking, right? There are multiple consequences to over talking. One is that I mentioned earlier, we repel people, right? When what we actually want is connection. Now, there are a lot of reasons why we repel people when we overtalk. One reason that we don't stop, again, I mentioned this one-sided way of talking that we've gotten used to with internet culture, right? One way that we trigger people with our over-talking is if you don't know somebody has history with like narcissistic enmeshment or any kind of, situation like that, you showing up And unloading on a stranger or unloading on someone who did not consent to being your soundboard can trigger them. It can trigger them. So, Lay, why would this trigger them? I will tell you why it triggers them. For people who are survivors of emotional enmeshment or emotional incest or any kind of narcissistic dynamics within their relationships, they are used to the narcissistic person hijacking their space, unloading on them, using them as a soundboard without their consent, and then not giving a fuck about them. So you showing up with your inability to manage your emotions, to manage your needs, to manage whatever, and just unloading on this person can be extremely triggering for them. A lot of times when you notice that you've had a couple interactions with somebody and they just do the smile and nod and like hide away, like disappear thing, and then after a few instances you don't see them anymore, you probably triggered them. They probably have some history with emotional enmeshment, and they see you, person they don't know very well, person who has become overly familiar, which I'll talk about in a second, and is projecting things onto them. And they have every right to not want to interact with you. They have a right to boundary set. We don't get control over how people boundary set, right? They have an obligation to protect themselves. That's them meeting their needs. So in you not having met needs, you projecting that onto other people, you then force folks to choose. Am I going to choose my peace, my mental health, my stability, or am I going to choose people pleasing? So the only people that are going to repetitively deal with your overtalking, deal with that enmeshment that you're forcing them into, are people that don't have healthy boundaries. So that's definitely something to consider. If you are a person who you don't see anything wrong with what I've just said, and you're thinking, oh, well, most of the people in my life deal with me doing that. I always overtalk. I'm always the first to speak and the last to speak. If you think that that's okay and that the people in your life are obligated to deal with that just because they love you, you need to reevaluate your relationship with love as a concept, right? But then you also have to ask yourself, in what ways am I feeding this person's unhealthy patterns? But that's different. We're going to take this back to us if we are the people that overtalk. And I want to talk very seriously about the consequences that come with overtalking. The number one, and the one that, again, as a priestess, I'm most concerned with, and that I don't think people take seriously, which is why I'm always going to be a proponent of therapy. I will never not advertise or encourage people, even when they are getting spiritual work, to get help from a mental health professional, is that when we overtalk, right? When we think that the overtalking, the oversharing is going to bring us connection to people, what it actually does is leave us vulnerable to predation. What does that mean? If I'm a predator, say I'm a R. Kelly type, right? I'm going to go after the young girl who won't stop talking about their wounds. If she's advertising to me what is wrong with her or in what way she's vulnerable, I'm going to take advantage of that, right? Now that's wrong. That's evil. It's not a kind thing to do. And as spiritual people, we know that that's not how you treat folks. But if you are a predator, if you are someone who is looking to take advantage of another person, then yeah, you're going to keep your eyes out for the overtalker. You're going to keep your eyes out for the person that is so desperate and longing, that has such a high list of unmet needs, that they're just literally shouting, broadcasting their pains to people. A predator is going to hear that, they're going to zero in, and they're going to take advantage of you. I know that both in my work as a priestess and in things that have happened to me in my past. That is a reality, right? And so I'm saying this to you because I'm going to talk about workplace dynamics in a little bit. A lot of you guys get to work and you forget that your coworkers are not your friends. So they may not be a obvious predator in the way that like an R. Kelly or Harvey Weinstein kind of person is, but we know that workplaces are competitive. And if you hand over information about yourself to somebody who is in competition with you, you have no control over how they stand in their integrity. They will very quickly take the things you overshare about and use that against you. I know, I've gone through this in the workplace. Started a new job, had a whole lot of things going on, moved across the state, was honest with some coworkers about a recent family death. Do you know that they used that against me 6 months later to not give me a promotion? I had one death in my family, and the way that the people in my office talked about that is me always having a family drama, always having something going on. Yes, that got weaponized against me later. Now, we can talk about how fucked up it is to not give a coworker grace around one loss, or we can deal with the reality of the fact of, Larissa, you were telling people that your first week there, they didn't fucking know you. Why were you volunteering your personal information to them? I gave you guys my government name. But yeah, at the time I was still her. But yeah, that was something that I needed to hold myself accountable to. Why was I talking to these complete strangers about my family life? Strangers that were in competition with me, that never hid from the moment I got there that they felt in competition with me. That's what I mean about the ways that overtalking and oversharing can fuck up your professional life. One of the things that my godfather always says, and he's talking about it in the context of African spirituality, but I think it's important to remember this in the workplace too. You're always being considered. There's always an opportunity that you are going out for that somebody else wants. There's always somebody that's going to want your office. So why would you put yourself up on a platter for someone to take advantage of you in that way? Why would you do that? Be careful with your mouth. Be careful with what you give people about you. Don't give them a list of things that they can do to take you down. That's what you do when you overshare. So that's one way we mess ourselves up with overtalking, right? But also I want to go back to what I said earlier. If the overtalking is meant to build bridges and make connections, and we know that it does the opposite, right? That it flags us as needy to other people, and that they will then start to step back out of self-preservation, then you should be doing things differently, right? So again, having discernment, making sure that you're sharing information with only the people that need to know it or that have a right to it, remembering that everybody's not your friend. Your coworkers most likely aren't your friend. Doesn't matter if you've been working there for a decade or more. They're your coworkers. You can be friendly with them, but why are you giving them your life information? Hit some scales. Let me know if you guys are with me. If you are benefiting from this conversation, you can definitely send love offerings to my Cash App, $ Larissa Brown, or my PayPal at manzesoleil@gmail. Okay? Another issue is that we can't hear when we're talking. I don't care what anybody says, you cannot listen if your mouth is running. Your voice is going to be, to you, the loudest voice, even if you're at a whisper, right? So you have to understand, if you really want to connect with people, if what you actually want is connection, you don't do it by going up to them and dumping everything about your life over them. You share, you talk, you communicate, you have healthy exchange. That involves you being thoughtful about what they share with you, right? So again, it's something that can push people away. Yes, it starts as a coping mechanism, the overtalking, but it doesn't always work. So once you find yourself having these difficulties where you see that people are separating themselves from you, you need to step back and think about that, right? So again, there are 5 times that I want us to consider where we may be over talking, the consequences of over talking in those contexts, and things that we should consider. One of these I'm gonna mention, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not gonna stop doing it. And I know that most people do it. So it's helpful for us to think about it in terms of how we're showing up when it happens, right? But the first, I'm just gonna name them and then I'll go through them individually. So you want to be careful how you overshare when you're angry. All right. You want to be careful how you overshare when you're happy or you're excited. You also want to be careful about how you overshare when you gossip. That's the one I'm not going to stop doing. I'll talk about that in a minute. You want to be careful what you overshare in the workplace, what private information you share with your coworkers. And then the last one, you want to be very careful about how you're oversharing or over-explaining your life when you have hit a valley. So if you guys are wondering what I mean when I say hit a valley, if you guys have ever read the brilliant book by Iyanla Vanzant, The Value in the Valley, she talks about how we should carry ourselves, things we should be thinking about when we're experiencing a valley, which is a low point in our life, a low point that's meant to sharpen us and teach us something, how we're taking up space and what it is we need to be learning and how we should be acting during that time, right? But let's start with anger, because I think a lot of us do this. None of us are exempt from it, but we do need to be considerate about how we're acting, right? And Hunsi Alicia Oko, I hope I said that correctly, but one of the other priestesses at the Voodoo Institute talks a lot about productive use of anger in her work, right? So I'm not here to shame anger as an emotion. I do believe that anger is there to teach us something. When we are angered, it's because something triggered us. We need to isolate that trigger, be deliberate about our emotional response to that trigger, and gain mastery over it. That is my belief. But a lot of times when we have unmet needs and our anger is triggered, a thing that can happen is that we can overtalk. We can say some shit that we don't mean. We can just go from 0 to 100. Our words will burn down forests with our words. Like, we will just go off, right? And it may feel good, but we can undo years of relationships. We can fuck up our own reputation, reputations that we've taken years, if not decades, to build by speaking out of turn when we are angry, right? If our communication is anchored in any emotion that is reckless, especially an angry emotion, we will cause damage that is irreparable. And I think that we don't have a solid understanding of apologies in our culture. We think apologies are just a bunch of words, but real apologies are changed behavior, right? So you could do damage that is so violent that you put yourself in a position where you can't apologize. Because if someone chooses to never fuck with you again, or you lose a job, or you lose some sort of opportunity, you won't have the opportunity to show changed behavior. You won't have the opportunity to give an actual real apology, right? So it's real important. And I know it's tempting to go, I think people think that because I'm slow to anger that I don't understand the delight that comes with having somebody smooth clean the fuck out, but it's not always worth it. Not in the grander scheme of things, especially if you know you are in a situation where it will only ricochet off of you and make you look bad, where you will end up being in a situation where it's the moon barking at the dog, right? It's not worth it. It's really not worth it. So slowing down when angry, being deliberate. Am I talking from the place of what needs to be addressed and is constructive? Or am I speaking from my wound, right? And am I willing to let speaking from my wound cause a damage that I may not be able to fix, right? Am I willing to throw out years of reputation building for 5 minutes of cussing? That's something you have to ask yourself, right? Because going off is a form of overtalking and oversharing. Somebody may have done something to you and it makes it very clear to you that this person's a punk ass bitch. Is it safe in that environment to say that this person's a punk ass bitch? It doesn't make it any less true just because you say it later, right? Like, so I'm not saying that you don't get to have your feelings, but at what cost, right? So another time we overshare is when we're happy. And it makes sense. We're happy. We've experienced some sort of blessing. We want to share that blessing with other people, right? It's natural. But everybody ain't your friend. Everybody don't want to see you win. Sometimes you can have a win that triggers in somebody the understanding or confirms for them rather that they're mediocre. And sometimes when people are reminded that they're mediocre, they lash out. I'm not trying to be mean. That's a real thing. I've experienced this. I'll fucking go there. Okay, I'll say it. Because everybody don't know the name of the organization I used to coach for. But I was introduced to a coaching organization through somebody who misrepresented me to that organization on purpose. They did not expect me to get in that organization and excel the way that I did. So when I completed the program, and not only completed the program, I completed it at a higher rate than they did, they were not happy for me. It only doubled down on their efforts to talk badly about me to other people, right? So you can put yourself in the crossfires by oversharing good information, positive information, happy moments with the wrong people. Again, everybody's not your friend, right? But again, remember what I said in the beginning, that overtalking is often coming from a place of an unmet need. Realistically, if you had a healthy relationship to validation, you wouldn't need to run around and share with everybody every single time you got some money, every single time you went on a date that was successful, every single time you got a promotion. You wouldn't need to, because you would be so busy celebrating yourself that you wouldn't need the celebration from other folks, right? So if every time something good happens to you, you hop on the phone and you don't get off the phone until you've spoken to 10 people, and you know that at least 5 of those 10 people are going to minimize your accomplishment, what are you really giving yourself? You need to get yourself to a place where you are okay with your own validation. You don't need the validation of other people. So that way you're not casting your pearls amongst swine. If you have a success and then you run to somebody who's struggling to success and you are happy and you're talking about it, yes, you just feel like you're sharing your good news with somebody else, but to them that sounds like gloating. That sounds like bragging. It's going to make them feel small, and eventually they're going to pull away. So again, I'm not even saying don't share your good news with other people. I'm just saying being very deliberate about who your people are that you share that information with. Because everybody doesn't want to hear you win. And a lot of that comes from the fact that they themselves aren't winning. And they will make that your problem even when it's not. It's not worth it. Right? So being very, very mindful about why it is you need to celebrate with other people rather than celebrate yourself when you have a win is something that's very, very important, right? I've already talked about this. I'm just going to summarize it again. Oversharing at work can be weaponized against you. Again, if you guys have ever overshared at work and you understand, you've been there, we've all done it. It happens to the best of us, even the most quiet, most private of us, right? I am actually very quiet into myself in real life, but we all have moments. And the 2 biggest ways that we mess up are overtalking during the valley and overtalking at work. But right now I'm gonna talk about the overtalking at work. You will find out the hard way that everybody ain't straight. And what I mean by that is that people are very competitive in workplace environments. Everyone is always being considered. So when you share these personal things with somebody, and things get vicious, they may throw it. I've fucking done that to somebody, and I maybe I was trash. I don't give a fuck. This person violated me at work. I knew that they had a substance problem. I told them to quit fucking with me. They wouldn't quit fucking with me. So then, I shared some information. told the bitch to leave me alone. I didn't want to punch her in the face. I knew I got fired. So I just, I broke a boundary. But at the same time, had she not overshared with me, that would not have happened. I've already shared with you guys how I overshared at work and the consequences that had for me. It's not appropriate to talk to your coworkers the way that you talk to your friends. There are ways to be friendly with your coworkers, but if you share too much of your personal life with them, when it is to their advantage, whether you see them as a good person or not, we don't know who we are when we are in a space of longing. We don't know who most people are when they're in a space of desperation and longing. So don't offer them information about your personal life that they can then use against you later. Maze Guido says that I'm preaching. Yeah, thank you. I'm glad that this is helpful for you guys. If y'all think I'm preaching, share some love offerings. You can give them at my Cash App, $ Larissa Brown, or my PayPal at Monze Soleil. MonzeSoleil@gmail.com. We have 2 more. The 4th one I'm going to go over, and the one that I know myself I'm not going to stop doing is gossiping. We can overshare when we gossip. Now, some of you guys may be like, well, gossip in and of itself is an overshare. Yeah, whatever. Okay, whatever. But what I want us to think about is that a lot of times when we're gossiping, the information we're receiving is distorted. Sometimes we can attach ourselves to a situation based on one-sided information. And the way that causes us to suffer is that we will play ourselves later. I mentioned that coaching community I used to be a part of. Do you not think that those 2 women that did that dynamic of gossiping and talking about me didn't betray other people later on? Do you think that those people that they betrayed didn't come to me at some point and say, oh, I'm sorry, I made assumptions, I X, Y, and Z. Oh, I don't mess with them anymore. Bitch, I know you don't. Most people don't mess with those hoes once they understand who they are. But do you think that I gave a fuck about having a relationship with them? No, I didn't. So when you gossip, you have to ask yourself, is this a hill I'm willing to die on? Am I willing to repeat these things to people's faces? That's a huge part of the reason why I don't have a problem with gossiping. Because if I say it behind your back, I say it to your face, I say it to your mama, I'll put on a billboard. Like, if you can stand 100 on what is being said, then it is what it is. But if you don't know what you're talking about and you actively know that you're being given distorted truth, you may have to deal with some consequences with that afterwards, right? The last one. Again, leave some scales. I'm almost at the end, y'all. Just a few more minutes, one more lesson, and then we'll be wrapping up, okay? But this is the last one that I want us to consider. And it's when we are in a valley or in a depressive state, we can find ourselves talking too much. And it's weird because when if you've ever experienced a valley, you can go through periods of just damn near not talking at all, right? So you don't even know that you're over talking. But that's the unmet need. You're not in therapy. You don't have a life coach. You're not talking to your priest or priestess. You don't have a support system. So damn near anytime somebody talks to you, you just spill over to them. That will give you the opposite impact of what you actually need when you're going through a valley, which is support. Again, showing up in a way that's needy will actually push people away from you. I went through this. This is actually something that happened with one of those bitches in that thing that I was talking about earlier, right? There was a point in time where they were unemployed for a very obnoxiously long period of time. And anytime they would meet up with friends, because they were also one of these people who assumed that having a social media connection with somebody meant that they were an intimate friend. So when they started going to social networking events and talking to their social media friends, they would overshare about how hard things were for them, how they didn't have any money, X, Y, and Z, all this other stuff, right? So then eventually people started saying to them, like, hey, I don't think these conversations are appropriate. Now, given what I've already shared with you about this person, what do you think that they did? Do you think that they were responsible and they took that feedback and, did something? No, fuck, they didn't. They played victim. They played victim and they double down and they continue to use that to go and whine to other people to get sympathy. Do you think that that was effective? I'm going to take a sip of my wine while y'all answer that for me. No, it wasn't. It just pushed people further away from them. I'm not saying don't reach out to people when you are in a valley. You need community most when you are in a valley. But you also need to be deliberate about who your community is and not play yourself by assuming that the wrong people are a part of your community. Because what did I mention with the oversharing at work? Someone will weaponize that against you. Someone will use your valley as an opportunity to paint you in a stagnated position. And even once you get out of that valley, they will have frozen you in time on purpose. In that down period of your life, that mistake, that hitting a wall, that whatever, they will use that as a way to represent you or misrepresent you rather to other people on and on and on. So again, a lot of this is about, it's not so much about not speaking. We have to speak. We have to reach out to community, right? But you need to not get it fucked up who your community is. Because that is the easiest way. Yes, Monte Cueto says it's parasitic. You're damn right it's parasitic. But most parasitic people are subject to predation. So it's something that we need to be mindful of. Don't overshare when you are in a valley. Don't overtalk when you are in a valley, because then you make yourself vulnerable to predation. And people will freeze you in time on purpose and make your valley the representation of who you are. And again, your reputation is not something that you can always get back. So don't play yourself that way, right? I also want to say a couple things about setting boundaries with overtalkers, because sometimes, especially if you are somebody who's recovering from people pleasing, which I am, I've made a lot of progress, but shadows sometimes will always be with us. It can be uncomfortable to tell somebody you don't give a fuck or to tell somebody you don't have time, but it's the only thing you can do to protect yourself. So you have to be comfortable with, if you know someone, if you are not the overtalker, but you are in community with an overtalker, you have to get really comfortable with setting your boundaries. You cannot be somebody who values people pleasing over your own needs. So sometimes you have to tell people, like, look, either I can't talk right now, or I'm exhausted, I'm at my wall, I'm at capacity, or I got 10 minutes. If you know this is a conversation that's going to take more than 10 minutes, I can't be the friend to have this conversation right now. Adults can hear that. Adults, grown people can hear that. A wounded child trapped in an adult body, they will lash out. They will get mad. They will make you feel shitty for having boundaries. That's their stuff. It's not yours. But always make sure that you're protecting your energy, okay? But I hope that this information was helpful. I hope that this conversation was helpful. I hope that you guys understand that I'm actually trying to put you up on game rather than be shady. Honestly, a lot of you, I don't know a lot of y'all. So if you think I'm talking about you, the likelihood that I am isn't very high. But if you felt hit, then, you definitely want to get a shadow work consultation, either from me or another priestess at the Voodoo Institute. You want to get some support so that you can break the back of this habit. It's not something that's going to serve you. It will only fuck up your abundance and your relationships, and could potentially fuck up your reputation. So it's just something to consider. Are we conversing and communicating like healthy adults that want connection, or are we showing up as fractured, fragmented, broken people that expect others in our community to do our reparenting? If it's the latter, you got to fix that shit, because you will play yourself over and over and over again. Again, if you guys ever want to book a reading with me, I do both tarot readings, bone readings. I also do a lot of life coaching and consultation work. All of my services are listed over at voodooinstitute.com/Soleil, SOLE. So feel free to go over there, book with me anytime. Charm School is a series. I do a Charm School lecture. I try to do one every 2 weeks. Occasionally I do one every week. So we will be back, if not next week, then the week after. I have some more classes coming up in terms of the dating series. We haven't named it yet, but we will be doing another lecture, me and my sister, Monte Cueto. And once we have the date, we'll start advertising that for you all. I am running Black Friday specials right now, so if you wanted to get a reading from me, and you're cheap, I don't know any other way to say it, I do have readings that are as low as $25 right now. So again, go to voodooinstitute.com/Soleil and check out those prices. Divine Feminine Mentorship starts tomorrow. So some of you guys are late for that, but I will be doing that every 2 months. So definitely reach out to me to join the WhatsApp if you want information about upcoming dates, etc. Tarot mentorship is reopening. Girls teaching a lot, so get in on these classes. Other than that, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up. I hope you guys are doing well. I love you guys. Take care of yourself. Somebody is calling me at this hour, which is very inappropriate. So I'm gonna wrap up, and then I'm gonna call this person back and see what the fuck is wrong with them. And I love you, and we'll see you probably next week. Take care.